Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello and welcome to episode 114 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share the experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, training for a rating, or just thinking about getting started in aviation, we like to think of the podcast as your aviation companion and your weekly dose of aviation inspiration. My name's Ben. I'm a pilot with an IFR rating and a commercial certificate. I'm based in the metro Atlanta area, flying a Cessna 182, sometimes called the Beast. And joining me tonight, as always, from Nashville, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie, flying a Cherokee 180 named Lucy, it's our friend Brian. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Excited to be here tonight, and obviously we have a special guest, and so this is going to help us up level this whole thing. I think is to have just a more competent person.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. Speaking of competent people, joining us from Portland, Oregon, a sport pilot extraordinaire flying a flight design CTLS we like to call the Egg. It's our friend Ted. Good evening, sir.
Hey, nice to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Also joining us from Portlandia, who flies a Cessna 182, a very good-looking Cessna 182. It's our friend. He's living in the Portland Charlie, as it's so said. He's the artist formerly known as Instigate Creative. He's our friend Barry. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be here.
We're glad to have you. He's also an instrument-rated pilot, and we'll be getting into, some, our topic tonight is going to be checks and flows, checklists. So, but before we do that, I want to remind everybody, May 2nd through the 4th is our big Texas Send, where we're all meeting up at Tango 82, which is Gillespie County Airport in Fredericksburg, Texas. I almost said Tennessee. There's probably a Fredericksburg in every state, but This one's in Texas. We will be sending out an email hopefully in the next week. We're nailing down a few more details that we want to update everybody on. And so we want to make sure there are some folks that are coming that aren't part of the Discord server. So we want to make sure everybody is informed. And I know, Brian, you mentioned right before we went live, are we going to have enough space to house everybody?
Yeah.
I spoke with the airport manager at Tango 82. Very nice guy. We mentioned earlier it's their open house. And they're going to have, the first question asked me, he goes, does anybody in your group fly a Cessna 195? We really like to have one of those in our show.
All right.
And I said, you're overshooting a little bit, sir. That's probably not our group. But so they've got 40 spaces at the north end of the ramp. Now, they can make room outside of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. That's when the open house is. So, we'll have to, there's a chance we might have to say there's no space for you. But I'm going to talk through that more with the airport group.
We're already up to almost 40 airplanes already.
36 airplanes is what I'm showing. Now, we also have to keep in mind there's some folks who are VFR pilots, and if it's IFR, they won't be able to be there. So We're working through those details. Again, we'll be sending out some updates as far as that's concerned. We're still working on a location for the podcast, but it's...
Do we have anybody on chemtrail duty to control the weather?
Of course we do, but we don't say who it is that's on it. Yeah.
It's the folks in Portland that assign those duties. They're the ones that are controlling all of that. So, we're really excited about it. And, we are still taking RSVPs and love to see you out there. Mr. Siskind,
Yeah.
How about a little belly scrubbing?
A little belly scrubbing. Well, you caught me off guard. I was so mesmerized by your performance tonight, Ben, that I totally just spaced out. And you're just so on top of your game tonight. And
Which is the first time in a very long time that's happened. So I can see why it would catch you off guard.
Well, look, I'm not sure if it's legal, but keep taking it, yeah. All right. Housekeeping. We're grateful for you all making this the best pilot community that we know of, a positive space where we share everything from training experiences, share personal minimums, tackle ownership challenges, review flight plans, talk about checklists, and best of all, make new aviation friends. You can connect with us, join our Patreon community from $1 a month, or do a one-time annual Patreon. You can do that for 25 cents an episode. And, probably worth it. I don't know. Is it worth it? It's worth it.
It's worth it.
Okay. Access exclusive content, including check ride debriefs, killing zone conversations, and more on the Patreon, and obviously access the Discord community. 10% supports Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. Watch us live on YouTube, Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. Share your stories with us. midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. We read all the messages, and you might even hear yours on the show. For everything Midlife Pilot Podcast, community feedback, merch, dad hats, Big Texas Send t-shirts, or whatever else, and all those things, visit midlifepilotpodcast.com. Boom.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Ted, how about some community updates?
Yeah. So we've got some new Patreon people. I want to thank them this week.
Some of them are in the chat. Some of the new ones, yeah.
Yes. At the Landomatic level, we have Falcon Kurt, Eric T, and Dave B. At the Hershey Bar level, we have Drew, Tom C, and Jason S. At the Beast level, we have Erica G. Somebody ring a bell? That's our friend Erica Aerosafe.
Is that an internet scam? What is that? Erica G?
Yes. About half of it seems like about half of the show notes have a link to Erica's, either Erica or
Gilbert Aviation or Aerosafe.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So
I just figured, Brian, you sent her about 7 or 8 students, and as that was like her thank you of supporting us. I don't know. We're glad she's joined the community. She's been an active part as well. So it's very kind of her to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've had a busy Discord this week too. There were we had people that delivered pet food, like 500 pounds of pet food, and we had lots to talk about weather. It seems like that's a common topic this time of year. Bunch of new people introducing themselves, and a bunch of discussion about going full trim aft on landing. So it's interesting to compare Pipers to Cessnas on doing that. So it's great to see all those conversations going through.
Is that a 182 thing because the nose is so heavy?
Well, that's a good question for Barry, but for me, it's with the IO 520 in it. It is very, very heavy, and so it's not something that's intentional. It's when I put the mains on the ground and I ease the nose gear down, I look down and the trim is set all the way nose up. It's not, I have to have the trim at this level. It's just where things end up. How about you, Barry? Do you have a lot of nose up in yours?
I usually do like 3 swipes on the trim control. So it goes to best glide pretty quickly, but it's not full. After that avionics upgrade, losing 180 pounds of unnecessary poundage, I think most of that was up kind of behind the cowl there. So it's not nearly as nose heavy as it used to be, but it's definitely more than a 172.
Yeah.
Ben's is exceptionally nose heavy, so it makes sense. There's a difference there. Our friend Luke, speaking of Ben's 182, said, I plan on sleeping in Ben's 182 at the fly-in. Don't tell Ben. So plug your ears, Ben.
So, Luke, you are more than welcome to do that, but I have also slept in that 182 at Oshkosh, and I'm just going to say I needed about 6 weeks of chiropractic treatment after that. Now, you're younger than me. You're probably a lot more nimble, but just wanted to put that out there. It's I'll give you the key. You can use it all that you need it to. Look at that. We've got our friend Erica, the previously mentioned Erica's in our chat. Welcome, Erica. And thanks for your support.
Yes, someone said weather.
That's right.
And she appears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Say it 3 times.
Awesome. Hey, Ben.
Yes.
Have you done any flying this week?
Wow. That was a very natural segue.
Oh, here's the thing. I either do really well crafted segues or I just smash them.
I wanted to hit Ted had mentioned the comment from John D. What if I wanted to hitch a ride from Nashville area to the fly-in?
Yeah, Ben will come get you over here. He didn't care.
Yeah.
You know what, John D?
Ben's IFR roundup.
I was going to say, I might be coming through Nashville anyway. So there's, if it fits, it ships.
It's going to be like
in the 182
3-hour flight for you to get there. If it's IFR, it's going to be you're going to be shuttling people back and forth. You're just going to be flying the whole time.
That's exactly right.
But seriously, for sharing an Airbnb, sharing a empty seat, that's all great stuff for the Big Texas Send Discord channel. Should be able to arrange it there pretty well.
Definitely. To answer your question, your previous mentioned question, I had one of the best days today. Just going to come out and say it.
Oh.
I've been holding back on this. So it was good in a lot of different ways. First of all, I had this really big presentation done in Tifton. And this is my longest tenured client that I've worked with. And we've had a lot of updates, and we had 30 people gather together, we brought in lunch. But we flew down there, and I had my boss who'd flown with me one other time, but the forecast for that area, I mean, it was clearing a million in McCollum. By the time you hit Macon, you see the line of clouds. And when we took off, it was 1/4 mile visibility, 100-foot ceilings. If there were any designation of what the ceiling was, it was just completely socked in. But the forecast, every forecast I saw said it was supposed to start lifting at 10, and our arrival time was at 10:30. So I'd had a little bit of a buffer there. I had an airport 8 miles to the north of this one, or 10 miles to the north of this one, that I could have gone to. Would have been fine. But we shoot the approach, and it was literally down to minimums. And it was fun to see someone who's only been in a general aviation airplane one other time.
Oh, wow.
Shoot approach to a minimums. And she was like completely she could not believe that it happened.
It's like you're a wizard.
Exactly. And I made it clear that, pilots do this all the time. This is not something special that I do. But I don't know, it was very gratifying to see somebody kind of appreciate the art of instrument flying.
Yeah.
We had a great meeting. It was one of those days where everything lined up. And then coming home, we got cleared over the top of Hartsfield, and that was a really cool experience for, I don't know, just everything kind of just lined up great. It was a really fun day.
How much flying did you get in?
It was probably 2.4, 2.5, but I got to log an instrument approach, and that's always that's like a bonus 0.5 hours.
Yeah. That's a good bit of flying.
Yeah.
You got to log it coming back?
No. Okay. It was just the approach going in.
Yeah.
So, and what was interesting is the ceilings we started our meeting at 11, we left at 1:30, and the ceilings were at 600. They only went up like 200 feet, and it was supposed to be completely VFR by noon.
Wow.
And it still wasn't. It really hung in there really, really long time.
Well,
Hadn't seen that. I probably need to debrief that with Miss Gilbert.
That's what it was like here Saturday. Saturday, we were hoping to go to New Orleans this weekend for a quick overnight, but that did not work out because Saturday was that kind of it was just going to hang around. Now, it was one of those trips that if I had an instrument rating, it would have been fine.
There you go.
But think about how much money I saved by not flying to New Orleans. So,
hey, Ted, we need to keep a spreadsheet and track all the times that Brian admits when he says, if I have an IFR rating.
Oh, his attitude has changed over the podcast.
I think
for sure.
so.
Yeah.
My attitude's always been the same, but it's like, it's just one of those things where if it's within the scope of fiscal possibility, then I'm all about it. No
Absolutely.
problem.
What about you guys? Who else has been flying?
I flew a lot today.
I got
Yeah.
up on Wednesday.
Brian, why don't you go first, and then we'll hear Barry's story.
Well, hey, me and my buddy Luke, who's here in the chat, we flew today from. I picked him up in Cookeville, and we went down to Athens, Tennessee, where the Swift Museum is. And we were cracking up because we've been trying to go to this place forever. And every time we go, there's some big calamity. The runway's closed down, or I don't know, something. There's always some reason why you can't get in there. And finally got in there. First, before I tell you quickly about the Swift Museum, I just want to say that this FBO, we were just knocked out because they had a gift shop in there, and they had valve cover gaskets, spark plugs, headsets, batteries, compass fluid, toys for kids.
That sounds more like a pilot shop than a gift shop.
Well, yeah, it was a pilot shop / gift shop.
Okay.
At the FBO. It was all kind of put together. It was the most complete anything I'd ever run into at an FBO before. And I thought, why doesn't every FBO have all these common things that, but it was just interesting how it was very well curated. So yeah, Luke's saying here, I bought a Swift plane today that flew around the world. So I probably, okay. It is a good thing that I am not wealthy, because if I were, I would have.
There'd be signs.
I would have 1,000% today bought a Swift that was a project, but it was a $25,000 and in pretty good shape, sort of. And
sort of.
It had been around it's one of the Swifts that have been around the world. So it's got the really cool paint job, and then it's got the lettering all around it of all the places that it's been all over the world. Probably not a low hour candidate, but man, it was just the coolest thing. But anyway, long story short, if you get a chance to go to Mike India and go to the Swift Museum, they've got it's so cool. The community's based there. That all the woman there runs all the parts sales, and she took us back in the parts room, and I was like, "Are you the one that is OCD around here?" Because it was so perfectly organized. Yeah. All these parts, they have new old stock stuff. They have old stuff. They have new remanufactured things that all of that perfectly organized. And it was just such a neat thing to see. For so few of these planes remaining, such a completely and they have the type certificate and all of that, and just a completely organized effort to support that. And if you want to buy parts from there, you have to be a member and prove that you're not gonna, do whatever, like buy stuff,
resell it. Yeah,
yeah. But there's a huge market. But anyway. Right, Taylor Swift Museum. That's right.
Yeah, so Charles Lima in our chat says, my daughter asked where the Taylor Swift Museum is.
That's Swift awesome. Museum, yeah. Well, before the last Nashville fly-in, when we were planning it and looking at potential destinations, that was one of them, was to go to the Swift Museum. So that's how long it was really, we've been really neat.
These planes are so beautiful. They're just, there's something about just the form of them. Luke and I were just pondering this, just about how they're just so pure. They're just absolutely pure aircraft, in the sense that it's a low wing, it's a tail wheel, it's retractable. The gear is actually really beefy on it. Like it's like obviously it was made for people that were coming back from the war and wanted to fly something, but fly their wife around or whatever. Anyway, it was a really neat experience, and highly recommend that. Flying was good. It was very windy, very bumpy. Had some very interesting and challenging landings today, and they all went very well, and that was great. And no major calamities. So yeah, it was a beautiful day here. It was 68 degrees or something. It was beautiful.
Yep. Very cool. Barry, tell us what you've been up to.
Well, as Ted can attest to, Wednesday was probably one of the smoothest days we've had in 180 days or more. Yeah. Clearing 1 million, 5 mountain day. Could see every one of the volcanoes that were, completely covered in snow, peeking out above everything. I got a chance to go fly with a friend that's an editor for a magazine, and we did a review on the Icarus, which is a electrically charged view limiting device for IFR currency and training.
Oh,
Posted some pictures of that over in the IFR channel and then in the safety channel as well. It was a really interesting experience with that. You can set it to clear, which is mostly clear, and then you can set it to a couple different visibility distances, and it simulates, 6-mile visibility, 3-mile visibility, and low IMC. So quite a different experience than your blast shield style hood that you would normally wear, because when you're flying in the sun, you actually get that translucency through the hood versus just a complete shaded feel. So it simulates the high clouds that are closer to the sunlight a lot better.
Wow.
So got 2 approaches in with that, and just had a fun time. Got some footage that I got to go through and edit out to get back over to him. So yeah.
Where did you get your approaches in?
Both over at Scappoose. We
cool.
did the RNAV and then came back up and did the localizer down in.
I love that my day was like, hey, I went and saw some old planes and almost bought a really dumpy one. And then Barry's like, I was in the future.
I literally saw the future. Yeah. Well, Wednesday was clear and a million. And by the weekend, there was talk of snow at our 150-foot elevation. And it came down to about 1,000 feet. It came down to about 1,000 feet. But I realized that the weather is going to be slightly better than the TAFs were calling for. And so I got out a little bit Sunday and it was like, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be very flexible. I can go back. I can land somewhere else. I can not go to my destination. I can land the plane and take an Uber home. Whatever happens, I'm good with. And I couldn't make it to the airport that I wanted to go to. I went to another one, had a great time, got in some landings, went back to my airport, and there was a rain cell over a quarter of the airport. So I told him as I was coming in, this discussion is in Discord, but I told him when I was coming in, it's like, yeah, I don't really want to take that left downwind because there's a ridge there and you can't see the ridge. So probably not a great idea. So I was planning on just going over the river and circling for a minute. And by the time I got over the river, there was a little bit of space to come in. So it was really good. So nice, 55-minute flight. Just one of those where you get out. But
nice.
I was happy to do that in weather that was usually around here. I guess the thing is that it's usually gray, and this was blue sky and low clouds. So I guess that's why it was so much different for me. But, yeah.
Very cool.
Anyway,
perfect day to punch out over the top.
It would have been, yes.
As today was. Coming back from mine, again, this passenger who hadn't been flying a lot, we got to poke it out on top, and that was a great experience for her as well. She had no idea, what that experience was like. So, hey, Brian, we got some feedback.
Let's do
you
this
have
real
that pulled
quick.
up. I want to make sure you're prepared.
Yeah, I'm looking at the thing,
Great.
and look, I think even you just clicked on it. Okay, hey, look, I'm going to do this. It's going to be great. Okay,
I believe you.
yeah. All right. No, thanks for this listener feedback. Wait, does it say who it's from in there?
I'll grab a name. Oh, okay.
It's from Drew.
Okay.
He left us in Patreon, and Drew, we appreciate your support.
All right. He says, I've been a listener since starting my aviation journey 2 years ago at age 65. 2 years later, I'm instrument rated and just flew my new SR-22 down to St. Croix for the winter. Much of this has been due to the inspiration I've received from this podcast. Many thanks. I also want to mention that I recognize the quote from the last show, intellect has boundaries, yet ignorance is unlimited. As a quote from my favorite philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer. His favorite quote of mine is, the first half of life is the unsuccessful pursuit of happiness. The last half of life is the unsuccessful avoidance of misery.
That's awesome.
The people that listen to this podcast are likely in the same mindset as I am. And in some way, I think that flying is a way to stave off Schopenhauer's dark prediction for us all. To my wife, I refer to it as my, quote, dementia prevention program.
Oh, that's
Kudos for a great show. Thank you for that. That's awesome. I think I said Schopenhauer correctly. And
I think you did too.
And I love that. I mean, the unsuccessful pursuit of happiness, the last half, unsuccessful avoidance of misery. I love that.
Yes.
And the DPP, the Dementia Prevention Program. That's my whole excuse to fly right now is to prevent dementia. Although some would probably say it's already set in. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barry.
Keep that plasticity going at least, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I want to get into our topic tonight, which is all about checklists and flows. And that's why we have our guest, Barry, with us. So, Barry, I'd like for you to maybe take a quick minute to introduce yourself. And then we'll kind of launch into that, maybe get into the weeds there. So tell us a little bit about yourself for those that may not know.
Okay. So where to start? I guess kind of how I got involved with the whole Midlife Pilot podcast. I was watching the OG Chris doing all of his online videos with YouTube. I just started getting into the flight training. The project that I was working on was a autonomy self-driving vehicle project, and I was working on the interface design between the human and the robot.
So basically, you were just doing nothing. You were just super lazy. That you're saying,
yeah,
God, you're such a when are you going to do something?
Yeah, no.
We'll get to that.
Create something already. Why don't you?
So that project, a lot of the inspiration was coming from ATC, ground operations, how planes move around airports, and air traffic control, as well as the autopilot. So most of that was integrated into the designs that I was working on with the team. And at one point, I said to Sandra, I said, I really want to get my pilot certificate. She said, well, why wouldn't you? So within 5 minutes, I was trying to figure out exactly how to get on and get trained. And about 10 minutes later, she said, does that mean we're buying an airplane? And, it had to go from there. It was on full time. So I started training in a 172 in that airplane. There was a Checkmate that I started using for that. Showed up for training one day and it wasn't there. So decided that was not going to be a flight that I was going to work on. Went home, bought my own, and then bought a second one to stay in the airplane as well.
To be clear, you said a Checkmate. The Checkmate Aviation checklist was missing from the plane. And so you canceled the flight because there was no checklist.
Yeah, it was really integrated into my flight training at that point. My CFI, Jared, was very much into the triggers and flows, very much into learning how the airline pilots do things. And, we would run a flow and then we'd back it up with that checklist. So that was something that was critical to my learning at the time. And, as we all know, if we're going to do something right this late in life, you got to do it right. So
all the way right, not half the way right.
Correct. So about 50 hours into training on the 172, I bought a 182 and went out and bought all the different checklists for that. Some of them worked out for me. The one that I gravitated to the most was the one I was most familiar with. So that what became, part of my training on the 182. I did my first solo in that plane. I did my check ride in that plane. And as soon as I was finished with the check ride, it was time for an avionics overhaul, and went full glass panel with the Dynon and Avidyne system, and realized shortly after that there was things on that checklist that didn't match the flows that we were doing and the new flows that were being developed for the avionics. So it was time to use some of those design skills and put something together for myself. So that was, it was incredibly inspired by that Checkmate product that I had been using, and everything was done as if it was following the flow, the floor to door Cessna kind of, I guess, step-by-step process that you go through those flows.
Can you step back and explain flows?
Yeah. So as they've been explained to me and as I use them in my flight, it is a pattern that you move through the cockpit and you touch all of the different instruments and or control surfaces that are specific to that specific phase of flight. So, on a takeoff, you would do on a 182, it's down on the floor. You check your fuel, you go to your trim, you go to your cowl flaps, then you come up to your flaps and work your way across the lower portion of the panel. Then you work your way back across and make sure that everything is set. And then you pull out the checklist and follow it up to make sure that you didn't miss anything. So that's what my understanding. I'm not an airline pilot. So, my understanding is the standard ops for those guys are they spend hours in front of a poster before they even get to sit in the cockpit, and they touch all of the different points on that poster to learn what they're supposed to be doing prior to stepping into the cockpit.
Right. And so you do the flow and then you verify rather than I you can remember being early in flight training and holding a checklist, going through each thing as you're pre-flighting the plane, and
the walk around for me.
Yeah.
It was holding that checklist and then sumping the tank and then go, yep, I did that. And then I thought it would take me an hour and a half to pre-flight the airplane by doing it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that was very much enforced during training was this is a checklist, not a do list, right? Like it's not something that you're supposed to look at and go line by line. And what I found was, if you did follow the checklist, you'd be pointing to one side of the panel, then back to the other, down to here, over to there. And that it was there to say, yes, I did touch that. If I missed flight controls on the run up, then I would touch the flight controls, do the box maneuver to get through those. But, it was verifying that every one of those were done in that flow. They don't necessarily have to be in the same order as your checklist.
Right.
And that's the way you can feign redundancy in a single pilot operation.
Correct. Yeah. And the entire operation becomes one big memory item, right? Like each phase of flight gets to be a sentence of those components that make up the flow as a whole.
That's cool. So now let's turn the corner, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for this. You obviously were going down the rabbit hole of checklists, and then you probably ran into something that you found to be a challenge or problematic or could be better.
So for me, because my avionics, again, didn't match the checklist that I had been working with, I wanted to do mine based on my flows. I dove into it way heads over heels. I was into my instrument training. I was looking at how can I incorporate instrument flows into the overall flows. Does it make sense to integrate those? Does it make sense to separate those out? Okay, now what can I do with my performance numbers with the 6 configurations? How can I do my pattern hold entries? How can I do my emergency procedures? So I went full into, making this as bespoke as I possibly could to me and my aircraft. And I laminated it myself. I used it a couple times and it started peeling and falling apart. And I'm like, nope, we can't do this. Nope. So that led me to reach out to the founders over at Checkmate to see if I could have them laminate my product for me using their process.
And just a quick speck of background on Checkmate Aviation. I mean, everybody's seen those checklists, right? They're in every training aircraft.
The chances of you not having seen one are very slim. You may not have realized that you're holding a Checkmate checklist, but I do believe that it is abound everywhere.
Yeah, there's 32 years of development on the product. I think in the library, there's over 350 aircraft, and I mean different iterations of the same aircraft across 172 A through R, I think it is now.
Now, how would you know all this, Barry?
Well, after reaching out to them to take my design and laminate it, it became aware that they were looking to retire, and they were overly complimentary on the design that I had come up with, and asked if I was interested in becoming the new owner. So I reached out to Ben and said, hey, I'm coming to Atlanta. Was able to set some stuff up with him to go fly, and just said I was going to be in town. Didn't really fill him in on too much of the details until we got there. But we flew out.
And for the record, that we haven't actually have a podcast episode that has in the title, some guy I met on the internet. It was about co-pilots or passengers with somebody that I met on the internet.
Vetting
a co-pilot.
Flying with strangers.
Exactly.
I think it was.
And so this is the stranger that I met on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Flying down, getting some breakfast, grass strip.
Yep.
So, we went and met the founders and did some due diligence, and my brain went into optimization mode, and I was like, I can fix that. I can fix that. I can modernize that. I can improve this. This is a go. This is a go. So Sandra and I spent a bunch of time. We had been looking for like some opportunity to do a franchise or an investment. Had talked about possibly buying a plane for the flight school that I was training with, and doing like a lease back for them. And, we discussed it, and we said, yeah, we're going forward with this. So October of this past year, we took ownership, and I've been going full bore trying to renovate the company, knock off the dust, shake out the rugs, and get things up into a modern process. And
I gotta say, look, I think this is so crazy that only how many years ago was it? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that you're having the conversation with your wife about maybe I should get a pilot certificate.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And then now it's like, and so now I own all the aviation companies, and I'm just trying to figure out how to improve them.
Well, and to get the company by saying, I overthink and overdo things, and I made my own checklist, and I need it to be printed in a more quality way. And I just think that's fantastic. I did have to reach back with Barry. So Ben and I came on the podcast around September 2023. Mm-hmm. Barry reached out, just cold emailed me in November 2023 because of a comment that I'd made on the podcast. So I just thought that was funny timing, like when Barry and I first crossed paths. So
yeah, I mean we're just 6-minute flight away from each other now. And in fact, I've been flying in and out of the airport that Ben's now hangared at, doing all my towered training, and I went by there on Friday to drop off
Ted's airport.
That's Troutdale.
Yeah.
I went by on Friday and dropped off a whole new stack of the new Checkmate product that I'm working on to the flight school there, and the response was just phenomenal from the woman that runs the school there, Delcy. So,
wow. Do you want to talk about the changes you've made? You don't have to, but
well, I've come up with a whole new
the theoretical, the theoretical improvements. Don't give up your intellectual property here.
I've modernized the branding, so the logo mark, the word mark is all new. I've introduced some more modern look and feel. There we go. Ben's got one in his hands. One of my my first prototypes that Ben's working with there. I guess you and Stuart are having some fun with that.
Yes.
So new visual language for all of the procedures, in the color coding of different functionality. There's now a passenger brief prompt on the front. There's a crew brief on the front. There's an abort plan brief on the front. Rearrange some of the organization for the V-speeds. I'm taking inspiration from the guys over at OB to put your how to talk to ATC on there, just so that we have those prompts. So you remember what the order is supposed to be based on how they request everyone to call in. And then, there's some things that I'm really trying to address when it comes to the pilot experience when they're purchasing things. So I've got a whole new website in development, getting that into a state where it's significantly more focused on finding the aircraft or aircrafts that you fly so that you can get to those much quicker. And then I've got a whole series of other products that are in the works as far as companion products to the checklist for other things that you would do with your guests and passengers and safety pilots when you're out flying.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. There's so many tangential, I'm sure, ways that can go. Mike, I have a question about, is there probably, this is one of those things where there's probably a name for this particular discipline or the science, and I just don't know what it is. But did you have to research, I don't know how to ask this, like is there a basis of, I'm sure there's like a basis of study and research that helps people build things for visual to cognition to behavioral changes or things?
Yeah.
Like, is there some sort of a science that underlies these kind of things?
Well, there's a lot of user research goes into that science. There's human factors, cognitive science, a lot of that stuff. My training is industrial design, graphic design, lots of film and video for that small company in the Cupertino area that I worked for a few years. So, it's a blend of all of those things. And it's been an amazing kind of confluence of all of the different things that I've done in my life that's kind of come together with this. So it's been an amazing journey, and it's hard to believe it's real sometimes.
So a couple of quick comments. First, Luke's Landing. If this was a Georgia Bulldog play sheet, it would be a binder, but this is Georgia Tech, so it's only one page. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is there is a flow, there is a method into how he has these laid out, and Barry is allowing me to beta test this along with Stuart, who is a former airline pilot who was brought up in aviation to do flows and then check it off. A couple of people in our chat, One Dog Geek, our friend, and others are using electronic checklists on their EFB, which, look, we all have our own way of doing things. No way is the right way and no way is the wrong way. It's each individual preference. I tried doing the electronic checklist on my EFB, and it just didn't work with me. I needed a list that I can move around. I can stuff it somewhere. It's a pattern. And I know everybody has their own way of doing things. And One Dog Geek had made the comment, if he realizes that there's something on his checklist that he left out that's not on his checklist, he edits it a lot. And I got to tell you, I'm glad that you're doing that, but that scares the heck out of me because I feel like I would go so overboard with that it would take me half an hour to get through this startup checklist. So, but good for you for doing that. And I'm glad that you're doing that. But
yeah, and among our people that are talking about using ForeFlight for checklists, Wendell Geek says he also has his physical checklist in the airplane as backup, which I think is really common. I think the ForeFlight or those of us that have fancier panels, that putting it on the panel, those are certainly options, and they're good options. It's always right there. It's always built into the plane. I don't do that. I've got it. I'm kind of a tech nerd, but I prefer to have it on paper.
I love technology, but just the whole context shifting, on the iPad or your avionics, it was a challenge, and having it readily accessible. Mine sits under my my right thigh the entire flight. It's there, instant access, instant away. So,
yeah. But
So I want to
happy with-
answer.
yeah.
One Dog Gig asks in the chat, Ben, you've seen me run through my checklist. Did it seem overwhelming? No, it didn't. However, if I was editing my own, it would be overwhelming. You do a good job of maybe controlling yourself, but for me, I'm just saying personally, I would have a checklist that would be, 300 steps.
I have an argument here to put out there. Just to say, we were just talking about how these are not to-do lists. These are means of verifying that flows have been done. And I think that if you're in a position where you have a 4-flight checklist and you're constantly editing that checklist and getting very granular about it, does that hurt that redundancy potential that you would have? Because there's something about really codifying what this is, and then that's what shapes the reps and the behaviors, and it's not something that you're thinking about on a line item basis each time.
Yeah, I could see that going both ways, right? Like if you're making modifications to the panels, if you're updating your avionics, if you're realizing something new, depends on if you're going VFR or IFR. So there's different reasons that those checklists would change. I still experiment with the ones that I build for myself, right? Like, and as I find something new, I update it. So it's a low cost to put something together in order to have that confidence that you did the flow correctly and that you've ticked all the boxes on that safety items.
Yeah.
I really like what our friend Juliet Echo Foxtrot says here. I use the 4-flight checklist for pre-flight and before engine start, and then the physical checklist for the flight. I'm assuming is what he's meaning there.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting point and well taken.
Yeah, and Cheryl gives the counterpoint to the paper checklist doesn't crash like an iPad might, which is Cheryl says, I prefer the printed checklist, but decided to back it up with a 4-flight version after watching the prior fly out of my open canopy.
So for those of you that don't know,
incredible.
Cheryl flies a Grumman Tiger, which you can fly with a canopy open.
And she's in Texas, so that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Barry, how are you going to solve for that? You're going to have like a lead version?
Very, very, maybe a tether. I think we can do tethers.
There we go. Of course, you might poke an eye out that way, but that's all right. There's no liability in that whatsoever. It's funny to me, when I was going through training for both private and instrument, I would watch all these YouTubers who were super disciplined in their checklists. And maybe they were just doing it for YouTube, but I didn't get that sense. And there's still quite a few out there that are that way. And I think that's fantastic. But for me, memorizing, I would much rather do the flow. And maybe it's a midlife thing where we don't have the elasticity as we used to, where it's easier for us just to do a flow than sit down and memorize a checklist and go through it. But also when you're memorizing it, it also becomes rote. And are you really hitting on all the things that you're reading? Whereas the flow, I feel like you're touching, as you mentioned, Barry, you're touching those items and checking it at that point just to make sure you have them covered. So,
yeah, it's all three, right? So you read it, you see it, you touch it, you say it, you hear it, right? Like you have to get all of those in there. And depending on how you learn or what senses are you're most sensitive to, those are the ones that are going to trigger those responses to correct something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Barry, do you utilize checklists? What is that book, right? Like the Checklist Manifesto or whatever it's called. Like, are you? Has aviation ignited your passion for checklists beyond aviation?
Checklists were part of my life well before aviation was.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Used to do motorcycle track days with a bunch of buddies, and we had track list, all of the different things that needed to be loaded into the trailer before we could take off. Making sure that we had the right tires, the stands, the tire warmers, the water bottles, like everything loaded. So, and then one of my colleagues from a previous role, he was a user researcher, and his response was, "Man, you have to get this book, this checklist book. It's perfect." And I looked in my Amazon purchase history, and I had purchased the book like 8 years ago. I had to go digging through the house and found it on the shelf.
Sweet.
So,
I've already got it.
it's crazy how it's all come together.
Yeah.
Where's it going? What's happening next, Barry?
I'm working on the modernization, working on the website updates. We're going to go through and get all the products updated. I'm going to continue offering the legacy products. I want to make sure that, if you have that nostalgia feel and flavor, you can still get that old checklist that you're used to. I'm going to get everything up and running. We'll probably staff up here. And then I want to go start meeting with people in flight schools and working on, making checklist part of the training, integrated into the training more.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I do want to hit a quick comment. Prescott Flyer, who we need to give a hearty congratulations to, just passed his instrument check ride. Well done, sir. Congratulations.
Yeah.
He comments in our chat, "My checklists are living documents. They incubate in flight. Man, I got marbles in my mouth. They incubate in flight and eventually reach physical form once I've tested the flows over several flights." I think that's a big deal. I had, before I started working with Barry on what we have now, there was a website where you could actually build your own checklist. I can't even remember the name of it. And then you print it off yourself and you can go laminate it. And my laminations, like you said, but it would be 4 or 5 flights before I really got it anywhere close to where I wanted. So that's a great way to do it, and a lot less frustration that I have is if you want, do it on your EFB, be it ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot, and then nail it down. So let's hit one more comment from our chat from our longtime friend Brian D. He says, "I am a big fan of the Checkmate checklists. As a CFI, I carry one for each of the different models I instruct in. I wish there were more options for the physical size of the checklist itself."
What say you, Barry?
Reach out. We can talk.
Yeah, Brian, definitely reach out. It's been good to have a conversation about things that might need to be changed and ideas. So
The format is a big thing for me because a lot of the Checkmate, they're just too huge. I forget the name of the company. What are the? No, we're not going to mention the other ones. All right, but there's another entity that makes these checklists. That I have the emergency checklist and I have the regular checklist for the Cherokee 180, and it is fantastic because it's the perfect size. It's just the perfect size, and I want that size. Do you offer size different things?
Currently, there are 2 sizes, the standard and the compact. The compact can be a little bit difficult for those of us that are optically challenged. But the standard is probably a little bit bigger than your standard kneeboard. So yeah, I can understand. I prefer the compact size myself, even though it is a little bit more difficult to read. Progressive lenses make that a lot easier, but it's definitely a one hand for me. There are a couple different sizes, but open for discussion on that as well.
Yeah.
So I had the compact size, and I was struggling with actually seeing it. Especially, I have a checklist item that helps me through a hot start with our engine. There's a very detailed procedure, and with that, the words were like a size 2 font. And I felt like I needed to get my phone camera and zoom in on it so I could read it. But with the larger size, and I guess what I'm doing here is admitting my age because I'm a good bit older than y'all. It's gotten harder, and I've come to like the larger print. So that's, again, personal preference.
Well, the school that I trained at liked the half-page checklist, and there were, I think, 4 pages or 6 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always flipping through it.
That's how my old one was.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it was always on the wrong page. I whatever it was, I had to switch it 5 times every time I tried to do something. And
Right.
so
It's like a
that
USB.
is why when I designed my own, it's 1 page front and back, because the worst you can do is be on the wrong side of it. And
That is a really good point, because that was always the case with mine and Stuart's checklist.
There's a couple in the inventory for things like the King Air and the bigger airplanes that we have a 2-card system. So your normal procedures are on one, and then your non-normal procedures are on the other.
Midlife version. This is what Aero Grizzly is saying. We need a midlife version of the checklist, extra large text. Barry, what do you think about even having? It's actually not. It's not even purely rectangular. It has sort of a spare tire around the middle.
Oblong.
I'm thinking of the
Elliptical.
large print Reader's Digest. It's like, things like that, where they were like comically sized, and you realized, oh wait, yeah, this is literally the same thing, just twice the size. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's get another comment from Prescott. Flyer has a question for Barry. Does your company offer printing checklists developed by owners of experimental aircraft?
There are 2 products in the inventory that are called the universals. We have a universal fixed gear and a universal retractable. Those come with all of your V speeds, your weights and balances, room for lots of notes. All of those spaces are blank, so you can go in and fill all of those in. What I've been recommending for the experimentals is start with that, cross out items that you don't want, put in items that you do want. Then we work together to do a custom checklist specific to your tail number and your aircraft. We run it through the system, and then you have that becomes a file in our system, and then reprints are at the standard prices.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you've noticed in your in your audit of these checklists as they have been? Is there anything you've identified that is universally able to be cut out and is unnecessary, or has there been deletions that you've found to be common?
That's tough. I think with the wide variety of what is in your POH specific to your aircraft, we're trying to honor the POH as much as possible, but not going overboard. So, we've had numerous people reach out and say, XYZ isn't in my checklist, but it's in the POH and it should be on these checklists, or this number was off and it might be off by 1 or 2 knots. But we'll go in and make those corrections and make sure that they honor the POH.
I guess I just meant, like, if there's like a category or a type of information that you just found incessantly on these things, it's like this precious real estate that you've decided, we're not going to do the, Marshall signals or I don't know, like whatever,
I think with the 32 years that the product's been in develop, they've had lots of opportunity to remove stuff, and I'm just moving some of the stuff around, using human factors and making things a little bit easier to read and find. Still honoring that format. So if you've used a prior one, this is going to feel very familiar to you. One of my favorite stories of just the last couple months, I had a pilot reach out, ordered a product and wanted it overnight shipped for, I think it was $85 or $90 to have it overnight shipped. And I called him to say, I'm not really sure why you need it. And he's like, no, I need it. I'm a ferry pilot. I've been using these for 15 years now. Every plane I get into, I know exactly where to look. I know exactly what to do. It's my go-to for all of my ferry flights. Once I land and turn the plane over to the new owner, that checklist stays with them, and it becomes their Bible for operating their aircraft.
Wow.
So $100 is cheap in that case, because for the ferry flight, you don't have the hours in the plane. Yeah. I've got to hit Luke's comment, Luke's landing, talking about the 6-page checklist. He said, what's up with every flight school plane having a Rolodex checklist that looks like a wine menu at a cheap restaurant?
I wanted to hit Andrew L's comment, and I wanted to address it. I use a pocket-sized homemade in-flight laminated paper checklist. One side for run-up, takeoff, and after landing. The other side for in-flight, which is cruise, descent, and approach. And Andrew, I want to let you know, I've been working very closely with Barry, setting up a checklist for our airplane. And it's one page it's segmented by phases of flight. So it's very easy. It kind of follows a flow of a checklist like you have a flow in your airplane. Is that fair to say?
I think it's exactly fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like where your head's at on that one, Andrew, but that's exactly how he's got these designed here.
I can't take credit for that legacy. You know, the founders, Rich and Carol, they're the ones that perfected that over the years.
Well, I mean, it's your company now, so you get to lay claim to it. You bought those rights as far as I'm concerned. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on with us.
I'm so honored to be here. You know, it's been great to be a part of the community for so long. I'm excited to give back to the community as much as possible. It's been fantastic to have, you know, that you guys were part of the orbit well before Checkmate even came into the idea. So it's been a lot of, it's just amazing how it's all coming together. And
then just let me know when you're coming back down and we'll go hit Barnstormers again.
All right. Yeah.
Are we going to get a Midlife Pilot podcast edition of the Checkmate checklist, where it just has like
you should just do a fun one that just has like 3 words on it in like 36 font.
It's like it just says like
the icing on the vegetables.
Yeah.
Yes.
How to subscribe to the podcast, how to get on Discord.
How to use Discord.
Yeah.
How to drool without being noticed.
Yeah.
Only in the Globe, the Swift Museum, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, again, we appreciate you joining us. It's been a great time. I want to thank everybody in the chat for joining us. It's been a really lively bunch. It's been a really big group tonight. Yeah. So thank you for that. Again, Checkmate Aviation is Barry's company, and he's just done some really incredible stuff with it. So, gentlemen, anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I have a tiny shout out to our Patreon listener, Linda. Happy birthday, Mom.
Oh,
happy
She's
birthday.
A supporter. So, yeah.
Happy birthday.
All right.
We'll have Brian write you a happy birthday song and send it to you in the mail.
You say I didn't do it. It'd be terrible.
Well, I want to leave folks with our bit of wisdom tonight. In wine, there is wisdom. In beer, there is freedom. In water, there is bacteria. We appreciate everybody joining us tonight, and hope you have a great week. And signing off, episode 114 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.